Sweet, or The Sweet, as they were originally known, were or possibly are a British rock band. They started in their kind of basically as The Sweet. They started just slightly before being called The Sweet, being called The Sweet Shop in 1968, but they swiftly changed their name when another band released a single under that name. The origins of the band seem to be quite long and complicated, and from somewhere around 1962, some of the people were playing in different bands and different combinations until they eventually became the entity that was known as The Sweet. There was a classic lineup in the 70s of Steve Priest, Brian Connolly, Andy Scott and Mick Tucker. When they first started, they were playing bubblegum pop. And in the early 70s, they were taken under the wing of, or had an association with, the songwriting pair Nicky Chinn and Mike Chapman, who made them into a glam band. They were also became their managers. And so this pair were responsible for a kind of British glam rock hit factory at the time, which included The Sweet and Mud and Suzi Quatro and other bands like that. So some of their standout tracks were Wigwam Bam, Blockbuster and Ballroom Blitz. As the 70s progressed, they wanted to become heavy rock, or heavier rock than they were, and there was a kind of tension between what they wanted and what Chinn and Chapman wanted, and I presume Chinn and Chapman had very firmly the sales that were in their minds, whereas I think Sweet were somewhat more interested in the craft of what they were doing, which is a classic tension in these things. In 1979, Connolly left. Brian Connolly, who was the singer, and so they. I really like the fact that Wikipedia, at the point where it's describing this, then has a heading that's just completely po-faced, says 3-piece suite, and then talks about what's going on after that. From around 1984, there was confusion of various different incarnations, people in and out, and reunions, and eventually 4 different bands, one called New Suite and the other Somebody's Suite, from the name of one of the members. The only one of those that's still going is Andy Scott's Suite, by virtue of the fact that the other 3 have died now. So under their kind of mostly classic stint, they had 9 albums, and Andy Scott's Suite has also released 2 albums. Hi, my name's Dan. So this was the 3rd album by Sweet. By this point, they were calling themselves Sweet rather than The Sweet. It was my first listen to this album. I did recognise one track on it. I'll talk about that in a bit. I expected it to be more glam than it was, basically because my knowledge of The Sweet has been from their hit singles from the 70s. And this was definitely a rockier direction. There were elements of glam in here. Some of the tracks are written by Chinn and Chapman, but most of the tracks are written by the band or various members of the band. It's very varied. Mostly it's quite on the heavy side, except for Lady Starlight, which, in my opinion, is the weakest track on the album. It felt quite like they wanted to do a lighter, more kind of acoustic-led track, and had copied some ideas from other people. I'm not accusing them of plagiarism here, but it's a kind of similar feel to some of the things that I've heard. But it felt like the heart wasn't in that track. Mostly, though, it's, as I say, fairly heavy rock. Connolly's voice is very kind of rock and gravelly, very like the front guy of Slade. Actually, I would say it reminded me of that quite often. One of their distinguishing factors, apparently, and definitely present here on this album, is high backing vocals, and harmonies are definitely a feature here, and a good one. Is done well, and it's not done in a formulaic way so that it's always the same. There's quite a lot of variety to the ways where that's being used. It's so diverse that I think if I have a big criticism. It's that it struggles to have an identity because it feels like a lot of different ideas put together. It feels like there may have been some tension in putting it together between themselves and Chin and Chapman, which I understand may have been the case. I'm going to pick out a few tracks in particular. So the track that I recognise is Fox on the Run. Now, they re-recorded this a short while after the album into a poppier version, which was released as a single, which charted. I quite like this version. They've got a cover of My Generation by The Who, which is reasonably nice. I think it's probably not as good as the original. Apparently the band are huge fans of The Who. And then the most curious track on the album is a track called The Man with the Golden Arm, which is a cover of a track from a Frank Sinatra movie from 1955. And it very much has a kind of Bond-like sound to it, at least when it starts. It's got brass in it, but then unusually goes into an 8.5-minute drum solo, which I liked. It just felt a weird place to put it. Anyway, as an album, I really did like it quite a lot. It's varied, it's rocky, it's inventive, it's skillful, and it's very listenable. So I liked it. What do you think? Please give me your opinion in the comments box. That's it from me for now.